there needs to be some idea of inspiration, a spark, a seed of inspiration. Sometimes it's a lyric, sometimes it's a lyrical idea, a riff, chord sequence, anything, kind of whatever gets the ball rolling. Just in terms of record making advice and what I think is a good creative process is that once that starts to happen, make some document of it, like a little voice memo, demo, just however the idea comes and it develops, just be documenting the stages of that early part of the creation. And it's not really about making a good recording, it's just about making a document recording. And then, because that's something you can review and build on, maybe the whole thing comes at once and you can put the whole thing down, or maybe it's just like little pieces and it takes thought, and you need to take that little voice memo and start a little session because you need to put a rhythm with it or something. But just be making work tapes. Don't be overly concerned with the like what it sounds like, how in tune it is, whether just like get it down. And then from that point, maybe then you have something to share with someone else, to collaborate with you, whether that be another songwriter, a musician, producer, or however. Just having those documents of inspiration is really good. And then you can use those as sources to create pre-production recordings from, or just continue to workshop it. And then next is then adding, let's say you turn it into a Pro Tools session or your Ableton session, starting to add rhythm and content to it. Sometimes it's fine to have work tapes that are just voice memos, to then take to someone to help you make a record, and get into a pre-production phase in that type of environment. Or it's just something for you to build off of. Maybe you take the voice memo and you put it in Logic, and then you start creating rhythms and refining the melodies and adding other instrumentation to it. Start the progressing process, but don't, when you're in the seed of the idea and the creation process, just get it down. Don't think about organizing it yet. Just get the ideas down, so then you can go about the work of organizing it. Pre-production would be next, and they kind of in the early stages and even all through the process, in a way, it all blurs together, because even when you're making a voice memo, you're kind of in a recording phase. I have, on projects and working on songs with artists, sometimes there's elements of that work tape or that voice memo that you end up using. And they can sound interesting, and in the context of something that's a bigger production and the higher fidelity, that little work tape can sound really interesting. So be documenting, carrying it forward, developing the idea. Then pre-production, at least for me, I like to have something to be able to experiment with adding stuff to. Maybe you use Easy Drummer. I don't know. Maybe you even make just loops out of certain parts of your work tapes. Sort of start to build the foundation for getting towards the recording process. I'm not saying that you have to make the original creation process and the idea phase too big of a project. I mean, for some people that's helpful. Some people, they just get an idea down and they want to go to the studio and then just do the work to make a record out of it. Either is fine, but I think capturing the idea when it's fresh and new is essential, and it's so easy in today's world. I would say the next major thought process and stage is collect a body of work, or collect a body of writing and ideas, and then once you have enough material that you can select from. I always think it's a good idea to create and write more material than you think you would use for a project. Doesn't necessarily have to be 10 times, 5 times, twice as much, but just have a little bit of extra because when you have a collection of work and you step back and you think about making some choices and putting something together, you never know. You might have had a good idea, but it doesn't really fit what the overall body of work is. So it's like the thought of, well, I have that, but maybe I'm not going to include it on this. You might record it another project later. It might be a good idea to give someone else, or you might take that idea and then use it to co-write with someone else. It's just good to have that stuff. And it really, when you're in the moment of inspiration, it can be hard to remember what you've done or what the thought was. So getting it down is important. So then you're in the time where you have a lot of ideas, distill it down to what makes a good project, perhaps, or a good body of work. And then, I'm kind of talking about this with certainly the possibility of engaging a producer and finding creative team, but then I also want to talk about it probably more in focus of just a little bit more on your own, at least at this stage. And then once you have that collection of work, start to begin to figure out what the sound is going to be, what direction you want to take stuff, and start filling it out, start building it up. You might have your work tapes, and then you have pre-production sessions where you begin the recording phase, but it's maybe it turns into, maybe the writing and pre-production phase can turn into the finished album record stage. It just depends. But by sort of following these steps and doing these things, you're creating the opportunity for that to happen, as opposed to just having a thought in your head and then going to the studio or sitting down and saying, okay, now I'm going to make it official. I'm going to make it a record. It can be such a complicated and unknowing journey at times to make a record and commit to something. It's good to sort of workshop and build upon it and be able to share the ideas and engage others on it when that time comes. So begin a pre-production stage. The thing is I do write a little bit, and I can co-write. That happens sometimes, but I'm not a person that sits down and writes a song that then I go and record it. I'm not as much of an artist in that way. My artistry is in record making. So, from my perspective, I want to engage someone and then sort of help them with the vision and creation of it. Depending on what has come before, I sort of become involved. I want to take either the very simple iPhone voice memo work tapes and start to create some programming and vision and context around it. Or, I want to look at what someone has already done and built for that sort of beginning stage of production and figuring the sound out, and then see how it can be advanced. It also, the thing is like doing this work gives you an opportunity to take it outside of the creative space, the recording space, and listen to it out in the real world and get a little bit of perspective, share it with others, and maybe get some feedback from them. It's always interesting when you listen to something, even if I'm working on a project and I make a mix of it, a rough mix. Maybe we're in the recording phase and make a rough mix, and I leave the studio, and 10 minutes later I'm listening to it on my phone or earbuds, or put it on the car stereo, or go home and listen to it. It's like getting out of the creative environment. It always gives me a different perception and evaluation of the work that's been done. And I'll go home and I'll play something for my family and my wife. What do you think of this? Or how does it make you feel? And just sort of gauge their interest in it. It's so interesting what taking and listening to stuff and studying it outside of what the confines and environment of where you would actually create it, what that can provide you as insight. And sort of work on building that stuff up. When as someone that's not primarily a songwriter, I want to sit down and have a conversation with the artist and sort of get a feeling for who they are. I'm a co-creator. I'm the record producer, and sort of lead the process of making a record. And there's steps that we can follow. There's a progression to it, but I want to engage the artist and sort of find out what their vision is for it, build a conversation. It's nice to have a collection of songs, a body of work, to be able to talk to them about what maybe their favorites are, what they're thinking, compare it to what my list of thoughts are in terms of songs I would select. Like if we have 20 songs and we're going to make an album, well, we're probably only going to select half of them. I want to make a list of what maybe my top 5 are, and then see how it compares to what their top 5 are, and then that's a way to have a discussion that's not as definitive. Like, okay, well, I picked my 10, and I need you to tell me your 10, and then because in that situation, I know that we're not going to have the same 10, but I'm kind of curious. Like, well, if I give you my top 5, what are your top 5? Hopefully, it's also a gauge of like, well, how are we seeing this the same way? Are we feeling this the same way? Do we have 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top 5? Do they match up? Just kind of get in a conversation, get to know the artist, kind of understand their direction, because I'm going to help guide them to be their best. I'm making their record, and so having that material is it's to my advantage. Sometimes having demos that are too developed can be a little bit of a hindrance, because an early version that's almost too developed becomes a little bit too definitive. Like to leave a little bit of magic for making the record, a little bit of the unknown. Sometimes it can be hard for someone that has fully fleshed out an idea to take a leap of faith and see it a different way. But then, take that collection of work, start to build some vision around it, and get some pre-production prepared, or at least be able to have a conversation and be pretty specific about a few things. Work on arrangements. That's the other thing, that having these references, it gives you a way to document what the tempo is, what the key is, what the structure is. Begin to develop some ideas about arrangement and instrumentation. I like to make notes on all those things so that I can have a conversation. I'm very much a feel person, so I can listen to a song and I can know how I feel about it and create some vision about it. I can remember the structure, but I may not remember every single detail of it in a way that the artist or the songwriter might know. So for me, I like to make a lot of notes and be organized and prepared, so I can reference them. And also the thing is, I work on a lot of different music. Sometimes I'm working on more than one project. So having the notes is kind of good for me to get back to what my first impressions and first ideas were. And then, then the process should go to beginning the recording. I think some things that are important in the sequence of what we're doing, in terms of a recording, are make sure that the structure feels fully realized, that all the parts that are necessary for the song are there. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to feel completely finished, but that you have all the parts that you need. Like in terms of, if you have 1 minute of an idea or a song, and that 1 minute only contains one chorus, that's okay, as long as it feels like, okay, well, if we just expand on this, we have all of the parts, because that chorus can be repeated. Just little things like that. Do we have a full structure? If not, then that's something to pay attention and work on. So when I say I have all the parts, I mean do you have all the sections of the song? Does the song, in terms of the journey that's going to take for expressing a whole idea, does it feel like it's there? Does it feel like it has enough of the verse sort of storytelling, the chorus, the hook, reinforcement of the foundational idea? Does it need a bridge? Does it need another musical section that also says something lyrically that's not just another verse? Sometimes verses can be 2 or 4 lines of lyrics, and then the chorus can be a repeated idea that may happen 2 or 4 times, and that can be enough. That can be enough to tell a story if there's also some interesting music and melodies that are happening in the music to sort of segue in between and connect those things. That's kind of what I mean, like if all the parts are there. Arrangement and like actual instrumentation and parts and what's going to happen in terms of those type of parts. That's where the record making, that's where the structure and the outline of what the content of the story and journey is the structure of the song. The arrangement and production is like, how do you frame it and how do you present it? How do you hold up the dynamic of it and add context and contrast to it? The key can be determined by what is appropriate for what sounds comfortable and engaging in the vocal performance. You don't want it too high or too low. You just want to try to find the key that hits the sweet spot for the tone of the vocal, the ability to hit all the notes and transition, and for it to feel flattering to the tone of the voice. I mean, someone might be able to sing in a higher key and hit all the notes, but the tone of their voice might not sound right, or the tone of the voice might sound right, but then they can't hit all the notes. You just got to find that. You got to find that happy medium. So that's a little bit about key and the range that someone's singing, but then also tempo plays a part in that. If someone's singing, if the tempo of the music is too fast or too slow, that can have an impact on the ability to transition through the notes. If it's too slow, then it might be difficult to hang on to the notes enough and have enough breath to get through it. And then if it's too fast, it's like to actually transition through the notes and get to the next thing. These things are they can influence. And it's good to have the material to sort of be able to consider it and make some notes about it, so that you can go about the. So I want to have that stuff to be able to then sit down and say, oh, okay, well, I think this song has a lack of a bridge, or we need another instrumental section here because if we don't add in a little bit of musical space, then we basically have we're bombarded by a lyric the whole time. And in some songs that's good, but sometimes if there's a lot of words and the cadence is quick, you might just need a little bit of a break from it, so that it's there again, it's a feel thing. But writing these things down for me and being able to think about them helps me take care of the details and then sort of zoom out and think about what the big picture is.